A million bajillion people, shut-ins, in their room have tried to write stories about shut-ins in their room. And they all fail, except for two. 2 times it hasn't failed. But your one sucks, your one's shit. Your story about probably a girl who's a fucking hikikomori, who doesn't leave her room, and she's all paranoid and shit. It peters out after the first, little chapter, and you don't know where to take it, and it fails. Because stories aren't like music. Stories aren't like painting or art. Stories have certain rules they kind of have to be met. Unlike music, where you can really, really push the boundaries of what is music. You can do some field recordings or some fucking free jazz type shit. Or painting, where you can paint one dot on a piece of paper and you can do blah, like that sort of thing. Yeah, your conceptual art. You can't have a conceptual story because stories are actually even more basic than music and painting. Conceptual art works because there's a concept, so the art doesn't stand alone. It's about saying that the context surrounding the art is just as important as the art itself. That's basically the entire reasoning behind conceptual art and modern art in general, postmodern art, all that sort of shit. The understanding that the context surrounding the art is as important as the art itself, if not more important, or can vastly change the meaning of the art. But what does that mean? The context surrounding the art, i.e., the story we can tell ourselves to make the art make sense, to interpret the art. So that's a story. Everything comes down to these narratives, right? Well, not everything. A lot of things come down to these narratives, and narratives have certain rules. There's a reason. It's called the monomyth, and it exists throughout all cultures on Earth. There is a certain story, a certain structure that, for some reason, appeals to the basic human mind, and you can go weird with it. You can't. No one's saying you can't go weird with it. Look at this. Look at me. 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 Fuck. Look at me. Look at me. Fuck. Look at me. Look at me. You can go weird with it, alright? You can go weird with it. House of Leaves. You can go weird with it, right? No one's saying you can't go weird with it. But there are still certain things that make a good story or a bad story. Whether or not you like it or not. And trust me, I don't like it, because I would like to make stories the same way I make music. I would like to just work my way through it, just basically playing what feels right. And some people can do that, but that's a very, very rare type of writer. Stories need... And those people have an internalized, instinctual understanding of what makes a good story. The people who can just improvise a good story, they have a brain that works in a way that they can naturally, without having to necessarily consciously think about it, or linguistically, lexically think about it, they can intuit the sort of 3-act structure, monomyth type of shit. But still, let's talk about these 2 hikikomori stories that went well. The 2 shut-in stories that went well. One of them's Welcome to the NHK, the other one's Serial Experiments Lain. And the reason your one is shit is because you don't understand how to write a book or how to write a screenplay or whatever. You don't understand how narratives work. You don't understand how characters work. Very, very basic screenwriting, script writing, story writing, character writing rule is to talk about your characters, to figure out your characters' wants versus their needs. So, for example, let's talk about Welcome to the NHK. He wants to stay in his room forever, shut up from all society, because of past trauma. However, as a character, he needs to know what it means to care about someone and to grow as a person, to be. He needs to evolve beyond that stage of being a shut-in as a character. But you don't want to do that because you don't want to write a story about someone who isn't a shut-in because you feel like it's anti your own lifestyle. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it makes a boring story. And you'll notice, another thing a story needs is conflict, generally. You can write a story that doesn't have conflict, but you can't really. Okay, so, again, NHK. It's a pretty simple modernist, or even classical in some sense, but I'll say modernist for the sake of it. Literature, like It's basically a love story. There's your main love interest who's not really a love interest, but whatever. There's your side character, and this is where the conflict comes, right? The conflict. You got what's his name? Sato. Is his name Sato? I think his name's Sato. He's in his room, and then you hear the pooda pooda pooda, and his annoying ass neighbor is fucking him up. There's two existential threats to him. The first existential threat, the less important one, is that he's going insane, which is kind of like that's like a sort of motivation that the audience knows that that's something's wrong there. But the more important existential threat is the ticking clock of him running out of his parents' money to spend. So he like he does that scene where he breaks the ramen in half because he can't afford to eat more than half a pack of instant ramen a day, and he sleeps for 16 hours a day. Um, these are the existential threats that force him. This is the push that push him to go towards his needs, right? That's what makes a good character arc. So in order to have that, you need to have something, conflict, and you need to have other characters. And that's the biggest problem, is that you are writing a story about a fucking one character in their room. That you need to have your guy next door and your Misaki or whatever the fuck that bitch's name is. No, that's Ava. I don't remember what her name is. Misaki, I think. It's been a long time since I read Welcome to the NHK. Um, but you need to have your other characters for the one character to bounce off. This is the way you can do a story with minimal conflict, is by just having multiple characters. Like, Gochimon wa Asagi desu ka? Is the Order of Rabbit? There is not really any, like, major conflict in the same way there is in, I don't know, a Lord of the Rings or something. There's not, like, you need to take the room to Mount Doom, the ring to Mount Doom, right? There's none of that. But there is still conflict. It's normally in the form of comedy. That doesn't mean there's not still conflict. The characters are still characters with wants and needs. Like, what's her name? Chio? She wants to sort of hang out in the shop with all her friends. But she wants to not be treated like a kid, basically. She wants to not be treated like a kid. But she needs, in order to achieve that want, she doesn't understand, she needs to mature as a person. That's a conflict. It's a well fleshed out character. I mean, it's not the best character ever written. I won't deny that. I don't think it's the best character ever written, but it's a character nonetheless. And you can go with wants and needs as simple or as complex as you want. But your character doesn't have wants and needs. Your character just has wants. You haven't figured out who they are, what they need to do to improve their life, what character arc they need to go through. And I know what you're doing right now. You're saying, but no, thank you. I want to make a postmodern thing. Doesn't follow your fascist rules. Shut the fuck up. Even the most postmodern things need to follow these story rules. House of Leaves, for example, postmodern as fuck, or a staggering work of heartbreaking genius. Postmodern as fuck, right? Firstly, Lane is not actually that postmodern. It's a little bit postmodern, but it's mostly modernist. I'll get to that in a minute. But even the most postmodernist novels of all time type shit, right? That they still have characters with wants and needs. The main guy, not Navidson, the main character, even Navidson has wants and needs. Zabfino has wants and needs, although they're kind of mysterious at this point in the book, so I don't necessarily know. The main character, whatever his name is, the guy who does the guy whose perspective the book is written from, the framing device, if you want, he has very simple wants and needs. He needs human connection. He wants to shy away from it because of past trauma and whatever. That sort of shit. Everyone has character motivations. Your character has no motivations because they're shut in. And their only want is to... Their wants and their needs stay completely lined up because you're too afraid to write a character who is, like, interesting. Your character... And I'm not talking to anyone in particular because I've just seen a million different stories that fail for the exact same reason. Your character wants to be a hikikomori. Your character wants to stay in their room forever and kind of hate themselves. And they also need to stay in their room forever and kind of hate themselves. Because that's what's the cool thing to do. You're fucked up. You gotta have conflict between the characters' wants and needs to push the narrative forwards. Lane. Let's talk about Lane. Lane is, again... actually really straightforward. It's just a detective story. anyone who's seen Lane and understands it knows that at heart Lane is just a detective story. The Lane, she wants how it's a little more nebulous, and her wants and needs are kind of intertwined, which is really good writing. Lane wants to understand why she can't understand other people. She wants to understand why the world feels so alien to her, and so she starts on a journey to try and figure out to try and understand this. And through that journey, she comes to fulfill her need, which is to accept her need is to accept herself and understand her position in society. So her want pushes her towards the need. That's how you write a good story. Sure, a bunch of weird shit happens. Postmodernism is not just when weird shit happens, okay? There is no... Lane comments on the internet, but doesn't comment on itself. Sometimes it does. It comments on the internet, it comments on that sort of thing. It comments a little bit, a very, very tiny bit on otaku culture, but mostly comments on the internet, so through the internet and the links between anime and the internet at the time, you can say there's there is some element of self criticism, self commentary, whatever. But mostly it doesn't talk. It's not. If you want an example of postmodernism in anime, anything Nisio Isine's ever written, right? That's postmodernist shit. Lane is not postmodern. So how do you fix this? How do you write a good story about a hikikomori? Well, you need to... I think the postmodern view is not a good idea. I actually am going to say that. I don't like... Because it would just come across as stupid. It would just come across as... Unless you're unless you're a really talented writer, and I'm sure some of you are, and you can pull it off, whatever. But in my opinion, the best hikikomori story that hasn't been written is to go way basic. I'm talking... You got like man versus... I'm talking like classical literature. Like you got your Lord of the Rings type of shit, your good versus evil type of story. But then you got even older than that type of... You got your ancient Greek stories. Your really old... Your fucking Moby Dick. You need a Moby Dick. We need a hikikomori Moby Dick. As in, we need a man versus nature story. I think that's the next step that a book or story or comic or whatever about a hikikomori should do, is to have a man versus nature story. Because the key thing that the NHK does cleverly is to have like somehow make a character who interacts with other characters. Like some people, basically the point of NHK is that whatever his name, I really hope it's Sato, otherwise I'm gonna look like a dickhead in this video. Like, is he really a hikikomori? He is a bit, like, I guess. But only because he got the only reason that he still counts as a hikikomori is because of a bunch of plot contrivances. That the only other guy he talks to regularly literally lives next door to him. And most people probably wouldn't say going outside and doing this and walking next door is, like, that ridiculous for a hikikomori. And the only other character literally comes directly to his house. So, you know, he's a shut-in, but he's not, like, literally never leaves his house. And Lane gets through that problem, again, by... Firstly, Lane isn't a full-on shut-in because she goes to school. But secondly, The Wired allows... and she goes to Club Siberia and all those other places as well. And The Wired allows her to leave her room without technically leaving her room, right? And you got a bunch of fucking... And it's also very clever because it makes the characters she has conflict with are literally her. So they're just other versions of her, so she doesn't have to go anywhere to fight them. They're always present. It's a sort of man versus God story, I guess you could say, because, you know, the Lane in the clouds and stuff, and The Wired is all-encompassing, Protocol 7 type shit. Clever. There are many bad hikikomori girls in anime. Stories about hikikomori characters. Like, there's one, I tried to watch it recently. It was called something like Sasami-san at something. It was kind of shit. It looked cool. It had a great aesthetic. But the actual plot was kind of rubbish. Because they didn't understand how to... The actual hikikomori character was just... They didn't do it well. She was too... She wasn't actual... Like, her connections with other characters were too loose. I didn't have any... After watching 2 episodes, I have no idea what she wants out of life. I have no idea what she needs to progress as a character. They didn't do it well. because you need to have these other characters. Even NHK gets this right before they even introduce other characters, because they have Sato talk to his Figment Imagination NHK buddies, right? Uh, you need other characters to make it work. They don't have other characters, it doesn't work. That's why I stopped writing Noise after one chapter, because I realized I can't continue this with only one character. I need to go back to the drawing board, completely scrap everything, and rewrite it from the ground up so that it has like actual plot, which it is what it is. I'm still working on that, by the way. It's not going to be a comic though. It'll probably be a light novel or something. I don't fucking know. Um, so that one sucked. There was another one about it was a neat detective agency or something. I dropped that one as well because, well, firstly, they didn't make the Hikikomori the main character, and secondly, she was like, it's questionable, but how much she counts. I don't know. Again, they didn't establish her as a character very well. They didn't say, because they want her to. A Hikikomori is her want and her needs was just to stay in the same place and be on the computer all the time and do whatever she wants, right? They didn't establish this character is clearly unhappy and unhealthy and needs to go through a character arc. They didn't do that. They didn't bother making her flawed or anything because they had to make her too likable. Or I don't even know. Maybe it's just bad writing. Like that sort of thing is very common. No, I did that. There you go. That's what I'm saying. Does this make sense to you? Sometimes the characters you think are cool for one reason are cool for a completely different reason first. Like the reason you like them is actually very basic. Characters are predictable. There's archetypes that we like. Which is kind of annoying when you see it all in front of you. Like I can see the Matrix, you know that one thing where the guy's like, I don't in the Matrix, or he's like, I don't even see the code anymore. That's a bitch with a red jumper, whatever the fuck. You know that bit? That's me with serious fiction. It's me with fiction. I don't even see the code anymore. I just see the pieces. I just see the pieces, which is why I like anime and stuff, because it's all very built around that databasing, and that's why I'm really getting into visual novels now, because the archetypes are. Anyway, going off track. But that's why your book or comic or whatever about a hikikomori is kind of shit, because you don't know how to write characters, and hikikomoris are notoriously hard to write well, because naturally the situation they're in, they don't have very much conflict in their life that is good to write about. They may have conflict in their life, but their conflict is generally, you know, stuff like that stuff that doesn't work well in a book or a film or whatever. It doesn't, your conflict might be, oh, I'm playing this game really shit today, or I hope my mom doesn't kick me out, that sort of thing. uh, the people need to focus more on the how you're getting your money to live there. Uh, and they also need to have different characters interact with you, which is really hard because you're a hikikomori. Which is why Lane was very good with the whole internet thing. Netju no Susume also did that. It's supposed to be a shut-in who doesn't interact with other people, so they just did the same Lane thing where they made her interact in the form of an MMORPG. Clever, smart, good job, guys. That's the sort of thing you need to do. You need to have multiple characters, which is hard to write with a hikikomori, because as soon as you add multiple characters, it's no longer a hikikomori. So I would say do it online. But instead of that, you could have multiple characters online, but instead of that being the conflict, it being a romance or a detective or that sort of thing, it could be a fucking I don't know, something crazy. Like, if I was gonna write a story about hikikomori, I would do it like this. Hiki, she's you need to have a lot of therefores in story writing. Not like a and then. That's how you write a bad story. You gotta have everything should have everything. Every action should be motivated, which is why one of these things that happened in Grisaya that I'm reading was shit, because the motivation was so flimsy. Fuck you, author of Apple of Grisaya, whatever, Grisaya no Kaijitsu. Fuck you. You don't know how to. You fucked up. You made me hate you because you made one glaring mistake in your character motivations, and I can't ignore it. Fuck you. Anyway, Wow, this is a real schizo video. I'm all over the place. I just had a big cup of coffee. That's why. Um, Also, I slept for 16 hours last night, so I'm kind of I don't really know what's going on. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, this would be my story idea. This shut-in person, she's not, the temptation is to make the character like super fucked, like, oh my god, she's so mentally ill and stuff, and you can do that, but my idea would be more so like basically somehow force a Moby Dick thing in there. Like, this character, they have like two friends online, one of the same gender, one of the opposite gender, all of whom are, you know, in contact, because that's a good group dynamic to have. You have one that's a friend, one that is a potential romantic interest, and then if you want, you can subvert it by having the romantic interest be the friend and not the same gender friend instead of the other gender not friend, possible friend, romantic interest type of situation. Make them all some sort of anime archetype. So the Hiki girl can't just be a Hiki girl because that's not a good enough archetype. There needs to be something behind it. So, like, I don't know, make her as a main character. You would probably want them to be, write a main character person. The other two, you would have the friend character be a typical friend character. The guy who sits behind the main character in their class. That guy. Who always has all the hot goss around the school, probably works for the newspaper club or whatever. Um, and then you'd have the other character be the character who sits over here at school. Uh, you know, it's crazy that anime is this archetype that you can actually just describe a character's personality by where they sit in relation to the main character. Uh, yeah, so you could have the other character be some sort of I would say kudere would probably work pretty well here. Kudere. Yeah, and then you have them all because they're all online. You have them, so you need to have some motivation for a character to leave their room. Let's say main character smokes cigarettes, so they need to go out and smoke some cigarettes. Main character goes out to buy some more cigarettes because they ran out. They go to the shop to buy some more cigarettes. Meanwhile, while they're away, the other two characters stumble across something on the internet. God knows what. Main character gets back, somehow figures out they're hiding something from them, eventually gets them to divulge the information, and then you got the call to adventure. It's some sort of information that makes them that they've discovered that they can't tell anyone about, that they need to fix because it's a direct threat to them, not because of some moral thing. It needs to be a direct threat to them, and it needs to be something inhuman, something like I don't know, uh, a white whale type of situation. And then you would have actual motivation for the plot to continue. But it would need to be a cyber white whale, depending on how far you want to go, making sure that they stay hikikomoris. If you want to be like it's a redemption type of situation where they're transcending beyond being shut-ins, then you could have it be something which requires them to go outside, and then you could have the character arc of them slowly venturing into the outside world and becoming okay with it. And you could subvert it by making it somehow it's at the end they don't end up needing to get regular jobs or whatever. You would also need to establish how the characters have their money in order to stay hikis for a while. But either way, you need to have some sort of white whale. Um, I would say something like if you wanted to be super obvious about it, this is just the first thing that popped into my head. Oh, we discovered this. We found this article on 4chan. It says this bank executive is a pedophile and he's gonna no wait, that's a dumb idea. A better idea, this bank executive landlord guy is gonna evict you, or is gonna tear down this apartments that you live in, or gonna shut down this website. They'll be like, unless we can stop him, but we can't tell the police because they're in his pocket, or we can't tell anyone because they're in his pocket, so we gotta uncover this grand conspiracy. And then you've got the call to adventure. Now they know why they're doing it, and then at some point they need to stumble across a fourth character. It could also be on the internet, but now that we have a reason for the character to go outside regularly, which would be to get cigarettes, next time the character goes outside to get cigarettes, they could meet a prophet figure, like a professor figure. I'm talking Obi-Wan Kenobi type figure, who is like, yes, I know about this. I will join your quest and teach you what you need to know. And, it's a fucking hero's journey story, is what I'm saying. That's how I would do it. You can't just have character sits in room is sad. That's not a story. I wish it would work. I wish the human brain would be okay with that being a story, but it's not. You see what I did with that? I created some sort of interest, and all I was doing was mentally following the hero's journey up until a certain point, and then, the character that we met, the mentor character, tells them some information that helps them. Now they know where to go. Oh wow, they're all gonna meet up IRL for the first time. They all decide to meet up outside Shibuya Station or whatever. They all meet up. You get the introduction to all the three characters, and the fourth mentor character is maybe there, maybe not. It doesn't matter. And then they're like, and they need to meet up because they need to go to a specific building to do a specific thing in order to figure out some specific information, or they need to get some specific documents. A MacGuffin is always good. You always want a MacGuffin. They need to find a USB drive, and so they use their skills that have been set up previously. Main girl is happens to know how to lockpick, which could be set up previously. Well, this girl happens to be a hacker, which makes sense because they're all online people. And this guy wants to be is like I don't know, what's something that would be like acceptable for, I don't know, a maths genius or something, and somehow all these skills come in handy when they're breaking into this place, and you get callbacks to what's been set up. They break into the place, they grab the MacGuffin, they leave, and then they realize that someone's caught onto their plan because mental character, oh no, mental character's been killed by evil corporation. Oh no, mental character's been killed by the guy we're fighting. What are we gonna do? Shit. The big government conspiracy. This man's been oh my god, they look in the USB drive they found, they realize, oh my god, this guy we've been fighting, he's just the pawn in the game of these masterminds that is an AI that wants to take over the world. Holy shit, the stakes have just been enlarged 20 times, and we just found out some new information, and the mental character's dead. Oh no, and what are we gonna do? Where do we even move now? Because, oh no, the whole now we know that it's a whole conspiracy about an AI. How are we going to do anything when they completely outrank us? This is the lowest moment, end of the second act. Suddenly some new information happens. What if we team up to do this thing? I don't know, what would be something you could do to shut down an AI? I don't fucking know. I don't need to tell the whole story right now, but you can imagine that story would have some sort of ending, right? And this is just me. All I'm doing is following the structure. It's not hard to write stories. You just have to actually follow the rules, which is kind of gay and kind of bad when you're someone retarded like me. But following the rules gets you a good story. I don't know, you could have a twist. You could probably put a twist in there somewhere as well. Like, one of the main character's friends was actually on the other team the whole time. Whoa, that sort of thing. Not that it fucking matters. There you go. That's how you write a story about Hikikomori. You make them not actually a Hikikomori. They need to have friends, they need to have motivations, they need to do the hero's journey. That sort of shit. You can't just be a dickhead about it. I mean, you can. There's no laws against it. If you want to write, like, a little story that's like a... my favourite piece of Lane media, aside from the show, is the little one-shot comic that Yoshitoshi Abe did. And that's amazing. It has no typical characterization or anything. But the reason it works is because you have Lane characterized already, because you know her from the show or from the PS1 game or whatever. You know who Lane is, so you don't have to bother giving her motivations or whatever within that little comic, because you already know who she is and what her motivations are. And even then, they even set out Yoshitoshi Abe even sets out motivations in the comic, because she says, like, she's trying to remake her dad or whatever the fuck, which is the plot of the PS1 game, but for some reason isn't the plot of the anime. It's kind of weird, because I thought it was a really good, interesting plot point. Anyway, there we go. I told her, what have we done in this video? We got a lot done today, didn't we, lads? I explained to you why stories work, and then I wrote an entire story, and then I complained about Gosaya having a shit character motivation. I explained why the idea of a show having no plot is kind of nonsense. Shows always have plot, even if you don't want them to. Then I explained why you can't... Then I explained the hero's journey somehow. I don't remember. I've already forgotten. I've already forgotten what this video... Who am I? Who are you? What is this?